You have decided to add chickens to your homestead. Now what? How many should you get? What breed? What can you use for a coop? What do they eat? How much do they eat? Today I'm going to answer all of these questions and more. Let's get growing. Hello, and welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast, a show that talks about growing a garden, a homestead, and most importantly, growing closer to God. I'm your host, Crystal Mediate, owner of the Red Ridge Farm Homestead, located at the foothills of the beautiful Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming, USA. Our mission here at Red Ridge Farm is to help women of faith find the courage to grow healthy food for their family while building a closer relationship with our Lord and Savior. If that's you, don't let the world hold you back. Pray Just Plant. Welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Media, and today in Season 2, Episode 4, we are going to talk about chickens, adding chickens to your homestead, and kind of what you need to be thinking about, and maybe answer a few of those questions you have before you make the plunge. If this is your first time here at the Pray Just Plant podcast, I want to thank you for joining us and welcome. So let's get started. You have decided to take on the journey of adding animals to your homestead or adding specifically chickens to your homestead. But now what? What do you need to consider? What are the things you need to be thinking about before you go and get those baby chicks or before you get your eggs? Or we're going to talk about how you can get them and lots more. So I want to ask you, you've made the decision, but have you thought everything through? So first of all, I'm going to ask you a few questions, something that you need to be thinking about, and really come up with these answers before you actually purchase your chicks or or contact even a buyer or even go to your feed store to be looking. You need to answer these questions. So the first question is, why are you going to raise chickens? You've decided to raise chickens, but why? Why are you going to raise them? Are they because you want eggs? Are they because you want to fill your meat freezer with chicken? Why are you raising chickens? Do you want them just for pleasure, for just a pet to kind of help you in the garden, to be something that your kids can enjoy? If you're driving, don't stop and answer this question. But if you are just listening, I want you to stop right now, even pause if you have to, and write down the answers to these questions. So the next one is, where are you going to put them? Do you have an idea of a coop? Do you have an idea or a shed on your property that you're thinking about converting? What are your plans? What are your ideas? And I'm going to talk to you about housing, and I'm going to talk to you about what they need. But I want you to just take a moment to kind of think about, like, where in your yard you're going to put them, where on your homestead you're going to put them. I personally have 2 different batches. So I have one, and this has been after years of chickens, but I have one like right outside my back door, which I love having it there in the middle of the winter. So I kind of move my chickens around. And then I have a coop, actually permanent coop, in my garden, so I can keep them locked off from my garden and then they don't get into my garden and destroy things, because that can happen. They are helpful, but only helpful in certain times. And then, are you going to what we like to call free range? Is your yard suitable for having just a coop but no run? What are some ideas there that you want to do? And the next question is, are you prepared to spend time with them? So chickens are going to be a time investment, and we're going to get into all the details about what you need to be thinking about when you're talking about time investment. So you need to answer this question for you. Are you ready to give for yourself? Are you ready to give up time for them? And then here's another question that comes with chickens. Are you ready to muck out or clean poop up when necessary out of the coop? I personally clean the coop twice a year, and that's because I have a large coop. Now, if you're going to just do a smaller coop, a smaller backyard coop, it may be needing to be cleaned once a week. So are you ready to shovel poop? Because everything poops. And who will take care of them when you go on vacation? So right now it's spring and you're all excited about chickens, but what about what comes this summer when you want to go up on the mountain or when you want to take a day trip or a couple day trip? Who's going to take care of them for you? Bitches, just be thinking about who you could trust to do that. And then if you are in city limits, even in a subdivision, you need to find out if chickens are even allowed in your area. And you can easily find that out by contacting your city ordinance, or if your subdivision has an HOA, then you can find out. I know in the town close to us, you can have chickens, but you can't have a rooster. And so you're just going to need to find out those kind of things. And if so, you need to have how many you can have. So I think in our town, we can have 3, but they can't have any roosters, I think. And so you need to think about if you're even allowed to have them in your backyard. Is it legal? And now we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So those are the questions that I want you to answer. And I want you to, if you couldn't answer them right away, I want you to think about them as we talk about different areas. So in answering that question, why are you raising them? If you chose eggs, if you chose meat, or if you chose pleasure, then that's going to depend on what breed you choose. So breeds of chickens are categorized in about 4 categories. So you have your heritage breeds, which these heritage breeds are going to be a little bit more for the pleasure side, because the purpose of them is to continue the breed. It's more about preserving that heritage breed, and they're going to have different assets of egg laying and meat or dual purpose, which we're going to get into in a minute. If it's your choice, before you even look at the other 3 categories, if it's your choice to be a person who is trying to preserve a breed, so you need to decide when you're looking at these other 3 aspects, do you want to include the heritage breeds? Are you okay with a few less eggs just because you want to preserve this certain breed? The next thing, if you're wanting to raise chickens for eggs, then you're going to want an egg layer. Now, if you're only wanting chickens for eggs, you're going to be wanting, when you're looking at breeds, you're going to be wanting ones that are high producers and they give you a large amount of eggs through their short production lifetime. So usually chickens lay really, really good their first, after 6 months old to about 3 years old, and then they start tapering off in their quantity of eggs per week. But some breeds will lay longer than that because they are formed and produced because they are such prolific egg producers. So these are going to be things like your leghorns, and then you have your dual purpose breeds. So a dual purpose breed is they're going to lay eggs for you, but they're going to be a bigger bird that could be, after they're done laying eggs, used as a meat chicken, more in stews and soups and those kind of things, because they're going to be a little bit tougher, but they can be used for both. That's what I have here at Red Ridge Farm, is we grow black Australopes. And last year I came upon a breed called Red Star Sex Lynx. And I'm really falling in love with this breed. I'm loving that they were earlier in developing their eggs. So they are a dual purpose breed, but they lean a little bit more to egg production. So I really do like that about them. They are a little lighter than the black Australopes, but just a little bit smaller, which I do like for my coop size. They are fitting in there a little bit better. But there's one definition word there that I wanted to find for you. So sex lynx is not so much of a breed word as how they are identified. So sex lynx breeds can be identified male and female by the color they are after hatching. So a female chick will look different, have a different coloring, different pattern than a male chick of the same breed. When you get birds from a hatchery, They try to examine to see if they're male or female. It is fairly hard. You kind of have to have a lot of experience figuring this out. So when you're hatching your own chicks, I've not been able to figure it out. I usually have to wait till they're older to really see if they're male or female. And so that's hens or roosters. So hens are the only ones who lay eggs. And so they're the ones we want if we're wanting to grow eggs. And so these being sex links, they can easily, it's like a double duel. The guy looks at them and they have the coloring, so there's more chance of you getting those hens. And then you have your meat breeds. And as the name suggests, these breeds of chickens are meant for meat purposes. They grow very, very quickly and they put on weight very fast. When we get our meat chickens, we get Cornish cross chickens, they will be ready to butcher in 8 to 9 weeks. And that is very fast, where your egg-laying breeds, usually it's 6 months before they lay eggs. They're ready to give their product way before egg-laying hens will. That is a meat bird variety. So when you go back to ask that question, why do you want to raise them? Question's going to help you figure out what kind of breed you want to go with. So now let's talk about, how do we get these chickens? One way that you can get them, when this is your first time getting chickens, you have a few different choices that you can go with. You can get chicks. And this is the most used and wise choice for novice people, because then you don't have to worry about the hatching, you don't have to worry about incubating, and you can select a breed you want, and you can get them when you want, and you get chicks that are about 1 day old. So you can get these chicks at your local feed stores in the spring, or you can order them online. The next is pullets. Pullets are birds aged between 4 to 6 months. So these are right before they're going to start laying. So pullet, so when we talk about chicken words, we have chick, which is a baby bird, and then we have rooster, which is a male bird, and then you have 2 words for female birds. So you have pullet, which are female birds who have not laid eggs yet, and then you have hens, which are female birds who have laid eggs. So there's 2 different words there. So a pullet are birds ages, like I said, 4 to 6 months. And you can get them, so they're right before they're at that point of lay. So they're a little cheaper than buying hens, which is the next thing you can do. You can also order those online and they will come to you, I believe, in the mail. That's how the other baby chicks come to, is in the mail. And then the fourth way that you can get chickens is by getting adults. I know when I was first starting my chickens, I got 3 hens and a rooster from my mother-in-law. That's how I started with chickens. So it was a very easy way to get into it. My kids were 2 to 3 years old, and it was a very easy transition. And then a few years later, then I went ahead and got some at my feed store and bought chicks. So now it is time for the tips and tricks segment of this episode, where I share a few bonus tips and tricks that I use here at Red Ridge Farm. So this week's tip is brought to you by the Soil Handbook. This handbook was designed to help growers get their soil prepared for spring and have a few ideas of how to improve your soil health. So the tip for this week is plant a tree. At the time of this episode, of this airing of this episode, it is spring, and spring is a perfect time to plant a tree. Like many people have said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is now. Let's talk more about chickens. So we've covered a few questions you should be asking yourself. We've covered breeds, and we've covered where you get them. And one thing I really do want to make sure when you're looking at getting chicks or getting your birds, is to look for health. So when you're looking at your birds or looking to pick them up at the feed store, or you get them in the mail, you want to make sure that they are not sleepy and lethargic. You don't want ones that are hunched in a ball. or sitting by itself, or reluctant to move, or any nasal or eye discharge, or what is called a blocked vent, which means they have poo on their bottom, which means they have the runs. When you do get your baby chicks, you want to check for all of these things very quickly, because most suppliers will guarantee your chicks for the first 48 hours. So if you check them, if they've had a hard trip, if you check them and find any of these things, you need to contact your supplier and make sure they know what's going on. So the next thing is going to be like, how many do you need? So if you're going with the egg laying point of view, if you are looking for chickens that lay eggs, one young hen will lay 6 eggs a week. If you have 2 hens, that would be about a dozen a week. And in 3 hens, you would have 18 eggs a week. So if you need to, one, go and check and see how many you can legally have, but also compare it to how many eggs do you eat. I know I am a very avid egg eater. I probably wouldn't eat as many eggs if I had to buy them, but get a kind of a calculation of how many eggs you use in a week, and that can give you an idea of how many chickens you should have. But it also was going to depend on how big a house you want, or how big a house you can have. Because a chicken is going to need, so if you need about 2 square feet per bird, so if you have a 3-foot by 6-foot house, then you can house 9 birds. Now, this doesn't talk about outdoor runs, but also you need to think about the time it's going to take to care for more birds, because more birds is also going to equal more poop and more food you're going to have to use and more water you're going to have to put out there. Really look how many eggs you use in a week and then calculate from there, and also take in those other areas. And as in meat chickens, you want to start out small. So when we first started, we did 1 batch of 15 chickens, because I figured I could do a whole chicken once a month. I could make a whole chicken, because it's really easy to get into the pattern of purchasing chickens from the grocery store, and they come in like all breasts and all legs and all thighs. And that was the way I was used to cooking. So when we first decided to raise our own chickens, we just did 15 birds so that we could get used to raising them. We started small, get used to processing them or butchering them, and also I get used to cooking them. So I knew I could probably cook 1 whole chicken a month, so that I could get in the practice of using that whole chicken, like cooking the whole chicken as a roast chicken, and finding other recipes that I could use for whole chicken. Always, when you're thinking about numbers or thinking about anything, think small at first. So we're going to talk about housing. So there's about 7 things you need to consider when you're thinking about housing. But the most important thing is you need to remember a few numbers. So you need about 2 square feet per bird for indoor space. You need about 1 nesting box for every 3 hens. And the yard is going to depend on your predator pressure, which we're going to talk about. But you need to have about 3 square feet per bird in a yard also. So the number one thing you need to be looking at when you are doing your coop is a coop needs to be weatherproof. Now, chickens can handle really cold temperatures as long as they can get out of the wind and don't have moisture on them. So the house that you build, or the shed that you convert, whatever you're going to do, you need to make sure that it is weatherproof. Number 2 is it must have enough space for your chicken. So we were just talking about space. So I'm going to repeat that. It's 2 square feet for indoor space, 3 square feet for runs, and at least 1 nesting box per 3 hens. Number 3 is you need to have good ventilation. Now, you don't want to have, the wind coming in, but you need to have enough air in there. You're not sealing it up so much that they don't have fresh air to breathe inside of their coop. And then number 4 is they must have nesting boxes. So you need to have, if you have 3 hens, you should have 1 nesting box per hen. I have found that if these numbers don't match with nesting boxes, they will choose to lay them somewhere else. So I free range my chickens in the spring and the fall, and I'm going to talk about why when we get to more benefit. They find extra little places to lay eggs sometimes when I don't have the proper number of nesting boxes for them. Number 5 is they're going to need a roost. Birds like to roost. In nature, you'll see them like turkeys up in trees. So they have a natural instinct to get themselves off the ground to sleep. So a roost is a couple bars of wood or a couple bars of some sort. You want them at least 2 inches in diameter so that when they put their feet on them, it fits just right over the space with their toes. And you need about 2 foot per bird in lineal roosting area. And then the next thing you need is they need to have an outdoor roaming and pen area. And if you have a closed in run area, then it needs to be about 3 feet per bird. If you let them free range, then that's going to be a lot more space. But free ranging comes back to number 7, which I don't think these are so much in order of importance, but I think this one is very, very important. So number 7 is coop must be predator proof. When they sleep, they are very susceptible. That's why they need a roost. When they sleep, they go into a very deep sleep, and things like raccoons, stray dogs, and weasels, snakes, things that can get into your coop can harm them. It's very important that you protect them from predators. Chickens just do not have the ability when they are sleeping to protect themselves. That's why you need the roost, and that's why you also need to make sure your coop and also your outdoor run is going to be predator proof, even from aerial predators such as hawks and eagles. We've talked about housing. We've talked about how many should we get? The next thing is how much do they eat? So laying chickens are going to eat about 1.5 pounds of grain per week. And it also going to depend on, so meat chickens are going to eat a little bit more than that. And because they're growing so quickly, for my personal amount, I have 30 layer chickens right now. That's going to be 45 pounds a week of grain that I feed. And this can be less when you also feed scraps, but that's all going to tie into the number of how many chickens you have. But what do they eat? So a lot of feed stores, you can purchase layer, which is a formulated grain that has everything your chickens are going to need in it. They're going to have the calcium they need. It's going to have all the proteins they're going to need, everything they need to lay really good eggs for you. So that's going to be a layer pellet or layer crumble. And then you have, if you choose to do grains, they also have chicken scratch. Now, chicken scratch is kind of like, it's not a regular food that you should be feeding them. It's kind of like if I were to compare grain, barley, and oats or layer to chicken scratch, barley, layer, and oats that your chickens will eat is like their vegetables. Now, when you throw in chicken scratch is a very high in fats, and it has a lot of millet and a lot of other things. Now, I'm not saying they don't need it, but it's like feeding them cake, like chocolate cake. They really, really love it. Do they need a lot of it? No. So you're going to need the best way when you're starting out is just to get a layer feed and then learn a little bit more about it. And then you can start mixing your own feeds. But you can definitely give a little bit of scratch in the spring when they're laying a lot more eggs. So now it is time for the Growing with God segment of this episode, where we concentrate on growing a relationship with our Lord and Savior. So this week's verse is wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart. Wait for the Lord. Psalms 27:14. Sometimes when we pray and we ask for his assistance, or sometimes when we are dreaming of something we want to add to our homestead, or we want something good for our family, or I have been dreaming about a solar greenhouse for years, and we always feel that it's never going to come about. I've been waiting so long. Sometimes there's a reason we wait, and it's so that when the situation does come, when we are ready to build that greenhouse, when we are ready to start expanding our homestead, when we are ready to jump into that connection with our Lord, and we wait for the Lord to answer our prayers. And it's through that wait that he teaches us something. He teaches us to, one, depend on him, but also to be strong. Having patience takes strength. Having a will to not give up takes strength. And that strength that is built through waiting is priceless. So I just want to remind you that whatever you're doing, if you're building a relationship with your Lord, if you're working on a relationship with your kids, if you are waiting to get chickens, if you are wanting to expand your homestead, but things just aren't working out, the wait is going to be worth it. And just be ready, and just remember that this wait is going to make you stronger. So wait for the Lord, be strong, and take heart, and wait for the Lord. Psalm 27:14. So let's get back to talking about chickens. So we've talked about questions you can ask yourself. We've talked about what breed you should get, how different stages of life that you can get them. We've talked about what you need to look for when you do go looking for chickens. We've talked about how many you should get. We've talked about housing, predator control, predator protection. We've talked about how much they eat per week. So let's talk about maintenance. Remember that question about, are you ready to scoop poop, or are you prepared for the work and the time that chickens are going to give you? So maintenance in having chickens and keeping them, having chicks is so fun, but these chickens are going to get bigger, and they're going to take more time, and they're going to need daily feedings. They're going to need water checking every day. They're going to need, depending on the size of your coop, they're going to need poop scooped out. They're going to need to be shut in at night to protect them from predators. They're going to need to be opened up in the morning. Eggs are going to need to be gathered. If you're raising meat chickens, I personally raise my meat chickens on grass. So once they're out of the brooder, which is what we call a place that you raise your baby chicks in, then I put them out on grass, and I move them to new grass every day. I make sure that the electric fence around them is working to protect them from predators. Having chickens is going to take work. And also, in maintaining your chicken house, you're going to need to clean it. I have a big enough chicken house that I can clean it twice a year. If you get a smaller backyard chicken house, you're going to have to clean it more often. And you can also do research into doing different systems, like a deep mulch system. This is something that I would really love to do in my chicken house. So you just need to think about that chickens are going to take time. They're going to take time from you daily. They're going to take time from you monthly. They're going to take time from you yearly. They're going to take time, and they're going to need to have maintenance. You can't just leave them when you go on vacation. So what is going to be the cost of these chickens? So we've talked about so many different things that they need, but when we first got into chickens, like I told you, my mother-in-law gave us some, and when I wanted to expand, one of the big things I told my husband is, we'll save money. We won't have to buy our eggs anymore. We're going to save money. Right now, I would say my chickens break even. When you purchase chickens, you're looking at, depending on what you get, between $2 to $4 per chick. And then you're going to need to calculate in cost of feed. And feed is about $20 per bag for a good layer, and also for a good meat bird, crumble or mix. When I have my 30 birds, I feed 45 pounds of grain a week. That's pretty much about 50 pounds a weekish. So I usually do about 3 bags of grain, which is 150 pounds of grain per month. Now, also, you're going to have to take into account that layer chickens only lay eggs. They lay very heavily in the spring. Then through the summer, they begin tapering off, and then they'll lay a little bit in the fall. And if you are up north like myself, they will stop laying through the winter. And that's because they need at least 12 to 14 hours of sunlight to lay eggs. It's some kind of trigger inside of them that's just how it works. You may not get eggs through the whole year, but you're still going to have to maintain your chickens through the winter. Now, if you were to supplement them with light, then you could get eggs during the winter, but then you have the cost of electricity to do that. And then you're going to need them to have a house. And building a house from scratch and the cost of material, when we first did it, it was probably about $300 in materials to build a chicken house. Nowadays, with the situation we're in, my husband is in construction and building material has gone up in price. So I would probably say about $400 to $500 to build a coop. If you could transfer a shed that you already have, you could probably save in that. I would say that the reason I grow chickens and the reason that you should too is that you have a peace of mind of knowing exactly where your food comes from. That food now has a story. You raised that baby chick and you saw its first egg and you collected that first egg and you tasted, fresh eggs taste so much better than store-bought eggs. So that's another thing. They just taste so much better and they're fresher. If you were to research chicken eggs in grocery stores, they are usually sitting in storage for 6 months, 6 to 8 months before they even hit the shelves in your grocery store. So they're already 6 to 8 months old before you taste them. There's nothing like having a laid that morning egg. And the richness of them, the yolk is more rich. You're going to be getting more nutrients, more vitamins in those eggs than store-bought eggs just because they're not stored as long. And so you're going to have better health benefits for your family. And the chicken that you raise, homegrown chicken, it's the same thing. It tastes so much better. One, you know what it ate. You know what kind of life it had. You know that it had its best life. And so cost, I don't know. I always tease my husband. Do you want to pay for good food that nourishes your body? Or do you want to pay for medicine when your body is not so nourished? So to me, the cost of raising your own chickens and the cost of raising your own meat chickens is priceless compared to the actual physical number. When we're talking about what they can do for us physically, we can also say that they have a whole bunch more benefits. I mean, I use my chickens for so many more things. So like before I mentioned that I keep them free range between the spring and the fall. So in the spring and fall, they are my cleanup crew. They go through my garden, they clean everything up, they scratch the surface, they till it for me. I've gone into no-till, keep them in a certain area and they can till up to at least the first 2 or 3 inches for me. And it's not as aggressive as me using a rototiller. They go through and will eat weed seeds for me in my garden. They have kept our grasshopper numbers down in our yard because the larva or pupa of the grasshopper is very young in the spring. So when I have them running around in the early spring, they are eating up all those grasshoppers, which helps my garden because then I don't have grasshopper pressure. The manure from the chickens has been so beneficial for my garden. When you do talk about manure, chicken poo is highest nitrogen. What they like to say is hot. So you can't put it directly on your garden. It needs to be composted before you do that, just to break that down a little bit more. I have stories from my grandpa telling me about how they used to clean out the chicken coop and they would put it in this certain spot. And every other year they would raise tomatoes and they would have so many tomatoes that it would last them 2 years, is what he said. So chicken poop is amazing. And so there are so many more benefits than just laying eggs. Another great benefit that I've noticed, chickens are an easy chore. So I have 3 boys and they've all started with chickens as their first chore. Well, you're going to go gather the eggs. That would be their first chore. You're 5-6 years old, so your chore is going to be to go gather the eggs. And then as they got older, they would move to watering the chickens or feeding the chickens. As they got older and older, they would take over the chickens until I had my next son come up. Usually about 10 or 11 years old, my kids have moved on to a different animal. So one got really interested in rabbits, so he had rabbits for a while. My oldest was really interested in goats, so we still have goats. And so that's his main chore now. So my youngest hasn't really decided what his thing is. So he helps with the chickens. He helps a little bit with the pig too. But chickens are a great way to bring kids into the homesteading life. I mean, those baby chicks are just so cute to hold, and they're so adorable that just kids love them so much. So just to recap really quickly, make sure you ask yourself those questions, especially now that we have gone through all these different things that you need to think about. Go back and re-answer those questions. Why are you going to raise them? Where are you going to put them? What kind of house are they going to have? Are they going to have an outdoor run? Are they going to have an indoor run? Are they going to be free range? Are you prepared for all the maintenance that's going to be going on? Are you prepared to shovel chicken poop? Are you prepared to raise a garden to use up of that chicken poop? Who will take care of them when you are gone on vacation? And can you have them in your area? Are they legal? I want to thank you for joining me today here at the Pray Just Plant podcast. As always, don't let the world hold you back. Pray, just plant.